podcast. I am Melissa Matheson, and I hope you and your family are safe and healthy during this time of difficulty and uncertainty in our nation and in our world. Hopefully this has been a good time for many of you to reconnect with your families in a greater way and spend time appreciating the gifts in our everyday lives that are often taken for granted when our lives are busy and going 100 miles an hour. A couple of things that I am grateful for would be coffee and coffee with friends. Although our local grocery store is out of whole bean coffee, thank you COVID-19, and we had to settle for the pre-ground coffee, the quality of conversation with my friends Ken and Christy made up for the less than perfect cup of coffee. This conversation was such a treat for me. Ken and Christy have been married almost 32 years and are passionate about the presence of God. They're worship leaders who hear from heaven and release the word of the Lord into the earth. Ken has recently authored 2 books, and we talk a little bit today about a couple of significant encounters he has had with the Lord. We're also talking about how they met, dated, and married, and just a little confession. I usually start recording the podcast while we're chatting and getting settled without mentioning it, because sometimes people get nervous, and if we're just casually talking, we can ease right into the conversation and people are less nervous. Well, y'all, when Christy realized 2 minutes in that we had already started recording, her reaction was so funny that her husband Ken and I could hardly stop laughing and get it together. You may want to swing over to the YouTube channel and watch it on video. This is a really good conversation, so grab your coffee and join us at the table. We're talking about music school, law enforcement, and God dreams. Today on What's Next, God? Now, Ken, do you drink coffee at all, or no coffee ever?
No coffee.
That's his
Just your Diet Dr. Pepper?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's it.
Morning, noon, and night. Like, that's your...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Always?
And water.
When did you get
It
on?
was always Diet Coke.
Well, yeah, I don't drink coffee, so it's kind of like my caffeine. You know, it's the way I get caffeine.
Your
But I
wake
drink
up.
water with meals and stuff, you know, and I drink water.
Yeah.
And we used to be big milk drinkers.
Yeah. No, I love milk. I would drink milk
we
at
were milk
every
with
meal.
meals and stuff when we were first married.
But if I
for
do that,
years.
I mean, I just kind of...
We don't anymore. We use
Swell up.
Yeah.
I imagine milk's probably not the same now as it was
And,
when you first got married, though, either.
No, I love cereal and stuff like that. And I mean,
We like dairy.
if you
Now, I
know,
like cheese. I like a good
I like
cheese.
cheese too. But midnight bowl of cereal, you know, I'd be on it if I didn't. That's the kind of thing I have to discipline myself. And then once in a while, I may do that, you know, like on the weekend or something.
That's that 19-year-old in you still.
I know. I was just thinking, why did we drink milk with meals?
I love it, man. I don't know. I still love it. Milk, bread, crackers, eating pretzels and milk, cereal and milk.
No, pretzels and milk. Just
Well, I don't put it in the
all
milk,
time.
just the combination.
Just the combination,
Yeah.
Salty
and
and dairy, I guess.
No.
But we've been we've been trying to do differently
Yeah.
for 30 years.
yeah.
I was thinking about that cycle too. We'll have a baby, so I do no dieting. So I'm sure he's just like, I'm feeding him. He's, we do no, then we have the baby and nurse for a year and then we diet. And that cycle has gone on for
On and on.
9 years yet.
So, because of
20 years.
this
I'm sorry,
cycle,
27 years.
Because of the cycle for you, is this why you were a coffee drinker, Christy?
Well, no, it didn't start till Kaylin about 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
She was like,
She got into
She
coffee,
forced it into
and then
coffee.
now you're into coffee.
and I was thinking about that too, that she, when she left 10 years ago, it was like, I can remember her. You know, like this is the way I can commemorate her every day.
Oh, that's so sweet. So for people listening that might not know, Kaylin's your oldest daughter.
Yeah. Are we talking already?
Yeah, we're talking. We're
Oh,
going.
No way.
Would you have wanted to know?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
okay.
okay.
All right, we're starting. Ready?
Okay.
So she was a good... cracking me up. So she's a good daughter to give her mom a new coffee habit. So.
Yes. She started.
I'm sorry, I will leave y'all alone.
Did I get her good, kid?
Oh, Lord. Thanks, got to be an angel of joy in here. There's something going on.
I do got the air conditioning on in case it gets too hot.
Oh, gosh.
I got it now.
That was good. All right. So, now I've known you guys. I'm trying to remember. I probably met you not long after I met your daughter. So I've probably known you 9 or 10 years. Is that about right? When did you first come to Hamilton?
7. We didn't come until she graduated.
Okay.
So a couple of years after.
But did you ever come and visit her those first couple of years she was here?
First year graduation, and then we moved here the first time. 14 was it? 2014?
That sounds about right.
Or 13, 2013 maybe, and moved in. Yeah. I think we got here in 13, and moved back to Georgia to take the position with the church there in March of 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, your family, I've watched your kids grow, and we have kids similar ages, and our kids have kind of grown up together since you've been here in Hamilton. So you moved here from Georgia. Mm-hmm. Is that where you guys are from? Where are you originally from, born and raised?
Well, I was raised in Jessup, Georgia, but my parents were from Eastman, Georgia, and her parents are from Eastman, Georgia. And she was, you were actually born in Atlanta, weren't you? Mm-hmm. Douglasville, somewhere up there.
Yeah. Did your parents know each other in Eastman?
Yes.
They did? When y'all were little?
Before
you were born?
Even born, yeah. Our dads did, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of cool. Is that how y'all met? Because your parents were friends?
Yeah. One of my uncles and her dad were best friends, one of my dad's brothers. And so that was the connection.
That was the connection for you guys.
Yeah.
Now, how long have you guys been married?
31 years, 32 this July.
Oh, I love the number 32. It's one of my favorite
I have a neat number story about the kids. Every year between March 5th and April, all the kids are either an odd age or an even age. So we've caught it at a good time. It's an odd ages, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So this is
13,
these 15, are the ages,
17, yeah.
So 5,
right
9,
now.
11,
5, 9,
13, no. 15, 17, 19, 21, 23, and 27.
That's kind of cool.
For 1 month of the year.
Okay, did everybody just catch that? How many kids do you have?
9.
So Ken and Christy have 9 kids, married 31 years. The oldest one is 27.
And the youngest
is 5.
Yes.
So, which I love because I'm one of 10 kids.
That's awesome.
So, and that's why I think Kaylin and I'm the oldest girl. Kaylin's the oldest girl, your daughter. And we just connect on so many ways.
That's special.
I think in that way, I kind of like being the oldest girl. Some people call me bossy. I say I'm a leader.
Yes, you are.
And when you have that many brothers and sisters, somebody's got to, when mama's busy, somebody's got to be in charge, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So married 30, what's your actual anniversary?
July 3rd.
Mm-hmm. Now, how did you pick that date? Is that a story?
It's a good, not really. I don't really.
Not because you're patriotic or 4th of July, which was nothing there for you. Just middle of the summer?
Well, we thought our parents have owned since about 50 years. They bought a condo on St. Simon's Island, Georgia, which cost about $30,000 back then. And that was a vacation home for the summers. And we thought it'd be a great time for family could come down there on that July 4th weekend, which a lot of people in Georgia do. They either go to Atlanta or St. Simon's, but especially people within an hour or two.
Yeah.
And they go watch the fireworks. And we thought it'd be a neat weekend to get married down there. And our family could just come down there and enjoy it.
That's a great idea. Yeah. That's fun. So, lived in Georgia, grew up. Did y'all know each other when you were kids?
Nope.
No.
There's a bit of an age difference, too, isn't there? What's the age difference in you guys?
8 years.
8 years. She's older, right, Ken?
I think you can tell.
Yeah. Okay, so Ken's actually 8 years older.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was a rough 8 years, too.
So you didn't know each other growing up. How old were you, Christy, when you guys actually met?
I was 18. So
Okay.
the summer of 87, I graduated from high school and went down to St. Simon's Island, Georgia, to get a little job and lived down there for the summer before I went to Lee in Tennessee.
You went to Lee University?
For 1 year.
I did not know that. In Cleveland, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. And so I had this little 8-week window. I was going to go down and get a job. And I did. And Ken's brother had started a church down there. He graduated from Rhema. And he started a church, and Ken was playing. He was playing the keyboards there, and so I started going to their church. We knew about that church,
Okay.
and so I started going, and I was telling Ken that I had never seen young men who loved God. I had always seen old men who loved God.
Did you grow up in church, Christy?
Mm-hmm. In the Baptist church.
In the Baptist church? Okay.
And so when I had an encounter with the Lord a few years before, but I had never, I said, we've talked about this today, I had never seen worship being led anywhere. I had never heard worship choruses. I mean, maybe just a little bit.
Because in the Baptist church, we just did a lot of hymns.
Mm-hmm. And I had never seen young men who loved God or were passionate about God. So when I saw that, and I saw him leading worship from his heart, singing a song from his heart. Oh my goodness!
It was the anointing.
Oh, wow.
That was it. She fell in love with the anointing.
Yes. Wow.
Did you see her that night when she started coming to church?
Oh, yes. I mean, I saw her. They came a couple
Now,
of times.
did you see her or did you see her? Like,
Well,
was very small church.
I saw her, yeah. I mean, I think we were the only two.
under the age of 50.
Yeah, the age that,
Very
yeah.
small church.
Yeah, that her options were limited, and so were mine. So, but we didn't need any more. But yeah, I noticed her the first time I ever saw her. Absolutely, of course.
What'd you think about her?
Wow, thought she
Yeah.
was beautiful.
Yeah. Did you know how old she was?
No,
Kind of didn't care. As long as she was over 18.
she was tall.
Yes, and blonde and beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. Absolutely.
Yes, beautiful. When was the first time you talked?
Well, we have a little backstory to
Tell
this,
me.
to our families being connected. You want to tell them? In 76.
Yeah, I think it was around 1976. My brothers were both musicians, and they're the youngest of the two of them is 9 years older than me, and the other one's 10 years older. But they'd been in bands, so I've been hearing bands practice in our garage since I was real little.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, the first song I ever sang was "Gloria" by Van Morrison in the '60s. When I was a little boy, they had me singing while they played, but they were playing on St. Simon's, and Christy's dad and my uncle and my dad and our mothers were all together down there. And Christy and I had not met at this time. I would have been about 16. She would have been about 8, you know. And so they were down there. I was not. I was in Jessup doing whatever. I don't know what I was doing. And my mother and Christy's mother were sitting in a park outside of this bar where my brothers were playing, while our dads and my uncle were inside listening to my brothers play in this bar. and so my mother and Christy's mother were both Christians, and the only Christians in both,
the family.
In both families.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah. And I think both of my brothers maybe had gotten baptized at young ages in the Baptist church, but they weren't living for God. I mean, they were in the bar playing, you know.
Yeah.
So my mom and Christy's moms were praying, and they prayed that both families would come to Jesus, and that all of the Mullis boys would sing for the Lord. And I'm not sure. It seems like I might have heard the story. Maybe Mama Joyce, Christy's mom, may have laid hands on the building or something. I don't know. It was something interesting like that. And anyway, within just a few years after that,
yeah, I wrote down some of the dates.
Yeah, every child from both families got saved. Rededicated or got saved, yeah.
Wow.
And filled with the Holy Spirit, yeah. And both dads got saved. And me and both of my brothers have all played music for the Lord.
Since then,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then
just
the two youngest.
Three of you guys, that's it? Three?
Well, I got an older sister, too.
An older sister, and then the two brothers.
Yeah, but she doesn't play music.
Okay.
And then Christy and I she was the youngest in her family, and I was the youngest in my family. And so the youngest from each family ended up getting married. Yeah.
All those years later.
That
is neat.
Yeah.
And all the Mullis boys sing.
Yes.
Do you know what I just thought of? I don't think that word was just for you and your brothers. There's still more Mullis boys.
Oh, absolutely.
Your sons.
Yeah.
All of your sons.
Oh,
absolutely.
Same thing.
Absolutely.
Singing for Jesus.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah, I love that words like that. Oh, I feel the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
It's meant for generations.
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't
Absolutely.
just a word for that moment. It was like it's a word for the generations.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of the Mullis boys. Think about that. All you guys can stand on that word.
Yes.
All of the Mullis boys from here on out.
Right.
Your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren.
Yeah.
All of those Mullis boys because your two mamas prayed.
Absolutely.
Amen.
How about that?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And you want to add anything to it?
No, that was great.
Well, they, our story was, so I was how old when we met? When 27, 26, maybe 26 when we met and 27 when we married.
Right.
But so it was like 10 years later when she and I met, because she would have been 8 at the time and I was 16. So it was, 10 years later that we met for the first time.
So when you first met at that church, did y'all know that, our moms and dads are friends?
Well, we knew, yeah.
You did know that. Did you recognized, that's the little Christy girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the Kofer family, and they knew us, who we were, but we didn't know, I didn't know her and had never met her.
Yeah. So when you first saw her when she was 18 at that church, how long had it been since you'd seen her?
Well, I don't think I'd ever seen her before.
Seen each other.
Oh, that was the first time.
Yeah.
That was the first time I'd ever seen her.
And you're probably going, why have I never seen her before?
I'd seen her dad when I was really young, because he and my uncle would stop by. They would go from Eastman through Jessup going down to the island, and they would always stop and visit my dad. So I'd been seeing her dad since I was a boy.
Little, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe even, 10 years old or something along those lines.
That is so
It's amazing.
That's
isn't
a great story.
Yeah.
So was there a first date? How did that happen? Was it accidental or was there an intentional, you said, hey, I'd like to take you to dinner?
Yeah, well, we were both in relationships with other people. Oh. And when we met. But this is neat. So we had an unofficial first date.
Okay.
An unofficial first date.
Has to be unofficial because you were dating other people.
And he asked me, he was doing a 3-song demo at a home recording studio, and he asked me to come along because he knew I was interested in music.
Yeah.
And so that was neat. That was my first introduction to him as an artist, him as a songwriter, and to hear his heart, coming out in his music. And so that was just a whole new experience for me. It was all
you felt
exciting.
hard,
Oh yeah,
Christy?
I felt hard and fast.
I can tell looking at her talking. He's like, oh, oh wow,
Oh my goodness. And so this is funny. So he was in this relationship. So that night, all I remember about that night is him leaning over the car steering wheel, just hitting his head because then he was trying to communicate like, I'm in this ordeal right now.
Yeah,
I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
He didn't have anything to do with me yet, but he was just like, I don't know what to do about it. And I was like, well, I have no idea what you should do. So I went home. There was some family staying in the condo. My sister-in-law, I said, if there was anything to that non-official date, there's nothing, because he's involved, with somebody, like he is in not torment, but he is in anguish over something. So I didn't hear from him. Okay, listen to this. I have like an 8-week period here to meet this man, fall in love, and set the course of our destinies. Okay, 8 weeks. And I didn't hear from him for like another 3 or 4.
Oh, wow.
After this, okay?
So, yeah.
Now I had my own deal, pulling away from my own stuff too. So about 3 weeks later, he calls me, and I've not, been calling, and he calls and he says, "Can you talk to me today?" He said, "You will not believe what happened." And I said, "Sure." Well, I was kind of like, let me check my schedule.
Yeah, hold on. Let me not be so available real quick. Hold on.
Yeah. And so he said, "Can you come over here?" And so I went over there, drove over there fast. No, and he tells me this amazing story of God gave him a word of knowledge, and it ended the relationship.
Oh, wow.
When he told it to the person, and they ended that relationship. And so then we started this really neat who am I joking? Not a courtship, but it's neat. We only had 4 weeks left, so that happened fast. We spent a lot of time talking. I mean, hours and hours and hours after that.
Yeah.
I just remember sitting on the floor at his feet, just listening for hours and hours and hours of all his stories and pouring his heart out. And I had never heard any man pour his heart out, and I've never heard a testimony before. I don't think I'd ever heard anybody's testimony before. I am not joking.
Yeah.
And I was just all in.
Yeah.
And then I had to go to school. I had to go to college. So by the time we had to leave in the next 4 weeks, we were just all just holding hands at church and just about to cry because we had to leave each other.
So you were living down there, Ken. Uh-huh. Okay. She was going to be going to Lee in Cleveland, Tennessee. When all of this was happening, we got 4 weeks left. Were you thinking when it's over, it's over? What were you thinking about the future? Or was this, you knew I have a future with this girl.
Yeah, we both knew then. Now. We both knew then already.
That was it.
Yeah. And Christy's brother, though, was sick. And you want to tell that story? Or
he was just in the last months of his life. With cancer, and he had dealt with it for 8 years. And I was so young, so we were just we can't do anything for,
a little bit of time. It just wasn't the right time. And
sure.
So I worked, and then she would come home about, I don't know, once a month maybe, or seemed like you did, or maybe once every 2 months. I bet it was once a month. Or either I would go up there.
And this explains why you only went to Lee for 1 year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Then we got married the next July.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me, first meeting happened in the church in June. In June.
Got married the next July.
The next July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we were older or our family circumstances weren't as they were, we
probably would have done earlier.
We would have been that couple. Yeah, we would have been that couple who went to Vegas. Yeah, we
wouldn't have waited as long as we did. And then after we got married, she transferred to Georgia Southern, and I got a job in Statesboro, Georgia. And so that's where we moved, and she finished her music degree there, and we lived there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I still led church at my brother's. It seems like we went home maybe once a month from there, and I'd lead worship when I'd go. And then we played in a church, a New Covenant church in Statesboro, on the worship team there.
That was fun.
So I was playing kind of in 2 churches back then, but it was fun. We loved it. And it was a great start.
Great start. It was a great start.
I bet your parents were just tickled when they found out.
Yeah, they were.
I mean, for you guys to finally come together like that. Were they surprised?
I don't know. We have never asked them, but...
No, I remember when I went to ask her dad's permission, I went the one weekend to ask, and I couldn't. He was he used to be the commissioner of Georgia State Patrol. He was retired. He was the head of the State Patrol. And so I was sitting there, and so I was supposed to ask...
And I went too, didn't I? Maybe one time you went by yourself. I think we went together.
No, I think I went by myself the first time. The second time, the next week I went back.
We couldn't do it.
I couldn't do it the first week. I could not do it.
So Christy had to go to make sure this happened.
Yeah, and then after I asked, then he just sat there and stared straight ahead, for a while. And didn't answer, nothing, and I was like, oh gosh, this is why I didn't ask last week. But then he was good with it, and I think one of the greatest joys of them and my parents is how close our families became, because like at Christmas it was the Coffers and the Mullises together, like Easter, Thanksgiving.
Yes,
they always, they were there. And so like Kaylin, all the holidays it was always both grandparents there, and our moms and dads genuinely love each other.
Now, how long were your parents married, Ken?
Wow. 60 years, I guess, before my dad died. And her parents have probably been married.
I should know, but I don't.
I think I know. I think it was, I think it's probably about that long too.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that heritage.
Probably close to it, it wouldn't be much difference. Her parents are a little young. Her dad is a little younger. My dad, and her mom's a little younger than my mom. But our moms are really close in age. And my dad, he passed away about 3 years ago. And Mr. Kofer, he's in his early 90s and doing very well. I mean, yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So, tell me about the night he proposed, Christy.
Well, he kind of remembers that I did that. And I have no recollection at all.
What do you remember, Ken?
I don't remember.
I just know that I think it was just like, if this man sees a life with me, there's just no stopping what this is fixing to happen, and this is fixing to happen fast.
Yeah. When did this become official?
We didn't.
It's interesting because we talked so freely with each other from the very beginning and we kind of just, like, you just knew.
Yeah.
It was like you just never didn't know. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
It was like that. Sense. And so I don't know when the conversation came up.
I don't either.
And we may have hinted to it so many times. We'd already said yes to it so many times that in our own hearts that I don't even know.
It's already done.
There wasn't a lot of drama.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't there was no ceremonious engagement or anything,
Yeah, I loved God's sense of humor in that, because when you're sitting here saying this and but like if one of your kids comes up to you, let's just say your 18-year-old daughter comes up and there's a 26, 27-year-old man. And
that's what Destiny said this week. She said, Mama, just think about me with a 26-year-old man.
Yes. And as a parent, I want to go.
I was grown when I was 19, Destiny.
Well,
but were we really? I mean, I've got Molly, my daughter Molly, engaged at 19, which is, if you would have asked me 3 years ago, I would have just said, there's just no way, we're not allowing that. But her story is different than my story, and I just have to go, God, if people know, they just know.
Right.
And
that's what I'm hearing people say. When you know, you just know.
That's right. And I think one thing that helped that age difference, even with her parents, and was the fact that they've all known each other, right, even though we didn't.
Yeah.
True.
They know where each other came from. They had known each other for years.
Yes.
And like Christy's grandmother knew my granddaddy, who died in the 50s. I mean, but she knew him for years. So it's like she knew my ancestors more than I did.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I love, like, Christy, your mom prayed for Ken's family. You know what I mean? Like, these people, when you pray for people, there's just something supernatural that happens, like this love that's imparted to you when you pray for people. Yes. And for her to pray for their salvation and to see that, and then Ken, for your mom praying for this family, it joins you in a way that's just supernatural, that's so kingdom of God, cannot be explained. So she's like, she was your mom, Ken, when you were 16, before you had even met her daughter, kind of thing, because she had so prayed for you and your family in that way. Married in July, we went back to Georgia you went to school, finished your degree. So you went to school for music.
Yeah.
4 years.
Yes.
And officially graduated with music education?
Yes.
Okay.
With a vocal emphasis, yeah.
Which, if you don't know, Ken and Christy will kind of get into this, are very musical. What instruments do you play? Just piano mostly?
Yes.
Mostly piano. And you sing. Ken, you have a little bit more...
piano and guitar. I started on drums in school and bass. Pretty much just any standard instrument that you'd see in a band.
Were you self-taught? Just your family? Just being around your family?
Pretty much.
Came to you?
My mother had me taking piano lessons for about a year when I was very young, and I never did really excel at reading sheet music.
Okay.
And but I did learn how to. I learned enough music theory to read chord charts, and so then I started playing in bands on the road when I was 18. And so I'd been traveling on the road playing in bands and clubs and stuff. I was not a Christian at that time.
Yeah.
And
we were talking about that today, and that was such a cultural thing in our neck of the woods to go to a Holiday Inn. Not for me, but for that generation, a little bit older than me. The Holiday Inn was the modern day social gathering club. It was not like you think a bar, like people think, oh, that was a bar. But it was like, it was the place.
Well, it's like when my kids came to the ramp, the lights, the sound system, the musicians, the energy. At that time, for someone like me, that was the Holiday Inn.
So interesting.
It's like when I walked in the Holiday Inn and saw a great band and the lights and the sound, I was like, this is what I was born to do,
Yeah.
But of course, like I said, I wasn't born of God at the time, but still, it was my gifts were being affirmed.
Absolutely, it resonated in you.
It did.
Yeah.
And they began to develop, but I, because even after I got born again in 1982, and I did not like the music that I heard in churches back then. I mean, and I the first Christian song I ever heard that I just loved was Keith Green. And so I really connected with Keith Green during that time. And then, there was people like Sandy Patty and Larnell Harris and then Amy Grant and a few others that came out back then. And it was okay, but there was some edge that Keith Green's music that just I connected with. And to be true, I still love Keith Green's music, but finding an opportunity to play in a church, I found myself having to play palatable songs for the church rather than what I would have played.
To the Lord, yeah.
Right, yeah. Then, and there was no grid. Like for what we see today, like at the Ramp, at Bethel, at IHOP, there was no grid for that in those days.
Such an interesting time.
Yes,
for music. Who were some of your other greatest musical influences? I mean, even outside of the church.
Oh, wow. Well,
because we've got a lot of talented musicians in the world. They may not be using their gift for the Lord.
Oh, absolutely. Well, both of my brothers, when I grew up, I was born in 1960. So when I grew up, I remember one of my first vivid memories was John F. Kennedy's assassination, and then Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, all that time, the Vietnam War. And so we were listening, my brothers had Bob Dylan, the Beatles, Bob Dylan, Jimi Hendrix, all of that. I grew up literally hearing that. And they had their own band, and they were a great band. They had a great band back in those days. And so I was so exposed to all of these guys. And so for me, even great writers, like Bob Dylan, is a huge writing influence to me. But then at the same time, I loved the the Beatles, Hendrix, all of these people. And then as I grew older and became a teenager and all of that stuff, then what the 70s, my first concert I went to was Peter Frampton and Gary Wright and the Doobie Brothers, and Michael McDonald was part of that, and the Eagles. And so, and then when I turned 18, disco, these big discos and show bands and all of this stuff, and Toto, all of these bands like that. I was into that. Well, that's what people wanted to hear, in these big clubs with the lights and the sound and all of this stuff. And so I kind of went through those doors playing, and that was my influences in, musically. And then when I got to involved with going to church, like I can appreciate Southern gospel, but I don't think I've ever bought a Southern gospel record in my life.
I understand.
And maybe I wouldn't listen, but now I have heard some songs that I love. Like, man, that's awesome. Or, I hear the Gaither vocal band that blow you away or something on a song, but it wasn't something that I connected with at all. And so really, musically, I started, it was probably in the 90s before I really started, feeling like the real me was starting to come out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because I think like everything else,
what everybody else was doing.
Well, and what everybody wanted. It's kind of like you're playing what people want. And you don't know what, so there was it took a few years, and part of it is just like, when they had horse and wagons and Henry Ford builds a car and there's no gas stations, there's no
infrastructure.
None of that, no infrastructure so I came along when there was no infrastructure.
Right.
And I was saying no grid a while ago, but it's really no infrastructure. And so I still, have the same fire to do what I do now. I had gone through a little lull when we first came back for the last 4 years, but something has really quickened and awakened in me in the last few months, and it's like I want to play again, and I haven't wanted to. Yeah,
that's so awesome. I know you've had a couple significant encounters with the Lord in your life, but was there that time right before, you met Christy, when you said you were not saved yet, was there like a moment or a night that was a big turning point for you? Do you remember that night?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I, right before I got saved, it seemed like Christians were coming out of the woodwork. I mean, everywhere I turned, somebody was, I don't know, I just feel like I'm supposed to tell you about it. One guy was like, man, I live a horrible life, but I am a Christian. I got to talk to you, and then this Baptist guy comes, and he's on fire, and he's just witnessing to me. And then I've got a friend who on his way back to college, he stops by in Statesboro. I lived in Statesboro by myself, or back then. This was years before I met Christy, but he comes and he's witnessing. I mean, it's just like everywhere I turned. And so finally, and I needed the Lord. I knew I needed the Lord. I mean, I knew I needed the Lord. Yeah. And so I finally prayed, asked the Lord into my life. And it was just, I wasn't sure. So I called this friend of mine, the Baptist guy. I said, I prayed the prayer. He said, but I don't know anything that's happened. He said, you haven't believed it yet. And as soon as he said that, I said, well, I believe it. And as soon as I said, I believe it, it was just like, boom. Wow. I mean, it hit me. And I knew that I knew that I knew. I was praying, cool. In that moment. And so from that I was really just, it seems like I was born on fire at that time, and I started witnessing to people. I didn't even know what to tell them, but I got born, whatever I needed.
In the bars.
Yeah, it didn't matter. And so, this is just the true story here, because I got saved December 10th, 1982, and I was in the world. I was a friend of mine that was a musician that played in another band. He was a drummer. He came to my house, and we always smoked reefer together. And so I don't know who had the reefer, because I wasn't even, all I knew is I'd been born again. I wasn't going to church or anything like that. But I knew I'd been saved, and we're smoking pot. And I just started telling him what happened to me, and that I'd got saved. And he, the Holy Spirit just came on, and he just starts weeping. And, we're both just like, the Holy Spirit just came in the room, and he got born again. And he's still in the church to this day. He plays drums at his church,
so awesome.
And has been in it for 30-something years now.
Yeah.
But we didn't know what we were doing. And then so I had my buddy, he got saved, and then for a few years we prayed together. We talked about the Lord. I mean, he was like the person I needed, because we kind of built each other up so much, just the fellowship. Because I'm telling you, the circles I ran in, they weren't talking about anything.
Yeah.
So
that is so great. I love that God will go anywhere
to
get you. He'll go into the bars. He'll come find you when you're smoking pot. It doesn't matter. He'll go anywhere. And I think of that, goodness and mercy follows me, chases me down. Like mercy just chases us down, overtakes us. I
love it.
And we can never be too far from God.
Never.
That's
Oh,
right.
I love that. And it changed. You are definitely one of the most passionate people that I know about the Lord and the things of God. Your whole family, your wife, Christy, you guys just exude Jesus, in everything you do, and when you speak, and when you sing, and when you play, and you look at that and you just go, this is what it looks like. So, and the fact that you can tell the story. Yes. So I have one of my favorite quotes from Brene Brown. Well, it's not a quote. It's this thing about owning your story. And when you own your story, it works for you. Like it no longer, there's no shame in your story. There's no anything. It doesn't rob you. In fact, being able to say it sets you free, and then it sets other people free.
Absolutely.
Yes. So like, even though you were like, not in church, you were saved, and here you are telling this guy I got saved and now he gets saved, and you're both still not in church, still going through this process of learning. Joyce Meyer talks about when she got saved. She was an adult living in the trailer park and still smoking her cigarettes and wearing her short shorts, and she'd make all the girls in the trailer park come to Bible study at her house because she wanted them to know about Jesus.
Absolutely.
And I love that God is going to use, God just loves people so much. He'll use anybody. Yes. The little Baptist guy coming to find you, the old guy that said, I'm not living my life, but I need to tell you about Jesus. I love that. So how long were you guys married when the children started coming?
8 years, wasn't it, before Kaylin?
Wow. I guess so. Wow. Really? Was that crazy?
No. 4 years.
Okay.
4 years, yeah.
Okay. I was saying we had Kaylin, we had no children or one child for 8 years.
Yeah, that's what
she
it
was
was.
4 years. Oh, yeah.
We had her, after 4 years of marriage, we had her, and then it was 4 more years before we had Tessa.
Yeah.
Tessa. Wow, that's a big gap right there. Mm-hmm. Did you always know you wanted to have a big family?
No.
It just kind of happened.
I can tell you really quick how it happened.
You go ahead.
Well, I think we know how it happened.
But there's more. Okay, so we really wanted children when we first got married, so we got all these dogs, and that kept us happy while I was
I've heard of people
trying to
that.
finish college. Anyway, we loved animals. He has a very tender heart towards animals, and I do too. But so our dogs had puppies anyway. So we had Kaylin, and we just were in heaven, and it was a really hard delivery. And he said, "You don't ever have to do that again." And I said, "Well, I don't want to talk about it right now." And so then a couple of years later, we got pregnant and we lost. We had 3 miscarriages in a row.
Oh my goodness!
And one was really hard. I carried him to 20 weeks and had a little boy who we named Canaan. And so after that, we were very discouraged, just very brokenhearted. I mean, just very brokenhearted. And so I have a healing testimony. I know exactly where I was laying. I said, Lord, I know you took this pain. I am in so much pain. And I know you took this for me. And so he touched me. It healed my heart. And I've never cried about it since. I've never been in pain over it since. And so I got some words of knowledge about taking folic acid for a year and not trying to get pregnant again for a year. And that was kind of brand new back then, folic acid. And I did that for a year, and then we had no problem getting pregnant with Tessa, and no problem with her, the whole time, and delivered her. And so she was our test of faith. And then once we were so grateful to be able to have children, that every child after that was just a huge blessing when you think, I'm not going to be able to have any more children, Yeah. And there's also a word of knowledge in there. But anyway, God just did amazing healing of my body and healing of my heart.
In that too.
Absolutely.
Is there something special about your kids' names, or how?
Not really. I mean, everyone was inspired. Inspired. Yes.
Yeah.
Test of faith, very inspired. And then Josiah, just from the Bible, love King Josiah, who was a reformer. And I really feel like Josiah is going to be a reformer of his generation,
Yes.
And Destiny, Hope, we came back from church one day.
The Lord spoke that one to me,
Ken just put his hand on my stomach and he said, Destiny, Hope. And he said, I just feel like this is she's just full of destiny and she's full of hope, and and I just feel like that's her name. And I was like, yes, that's her name. Yeah. And Justice, of course.
I love
Justice
that name.
Michael, and John Caleb, a friend of God. And Malachi, August, and he was born in the month of August. We love Malachi. Malachi is like a life verse for Ken. Malachi 3. Yeah. And Mercy Grace came at a time when we found the grace of God and the mercy of God and then Corey Bloom. And one of my heroes and mentors is Corey Ten Boom.
Yes.
Yeah. It's just she's named after Corey Ten
I
Boom.
love that. Where'd Kaylin's name come from?
It was, I think in my thoughts, I was thinking Caleb originally, but when we found out it was going to be a girl, I changed it to
a version of Caleb.
Kaylin. Yeah.
So
Kaylin Rose.
Yep.
Well, all of your kids' names really do suit them.
Thank
so
you.
it's like God has already ordained names bring identity.
Yes.
And so those names, it's like God had already ordained those names for them before they were even formed in your womb. And then he inspires you with these names. So you guys have had some interesting jobs in your life. You've not always been a worship leader.
That's right.
Tell me about one of those.
Well, I was in law enforcement, and during the time I was in it, I loved it, and it was something that seemed to come natural to me. And
because your father-in-law was
he was the commissioner of state patrol.
Yeah.
And when she was going to college, they had moved me. I was working with the Department of Labor, and they had moved me to Savannah. So I was, from where we lived, I was driving 140 miles a day, commuting 5 days a week, and I did that for 2 years. And a friend of mine with the Labor Department knew the chief of the university police department where Christy was going to school, and gave him a call and told him about me. And because I was burnt out on that drive every day. I mean, it was a long way. That's an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back, pretty much. And from Savannah to Statesboro. And so, we lived up above Statesboro, so we were even further away. And so I was not. It's funny. I had a job offer earlier to go into law enforcement a few years earlier. And I was like, I just don't think that's for me, and that kind of thing. So I wasn't, I turned it down, and because I just couldn't see me doing that. Really, I couldn't. And so, this chief of the University Police, he talked to me and he liked me and offered me a job. And I really got in law enforcement because I was so sick of driving back and forth to Savannah, and I was about willing to take anything to keep from having to do that. But I went through the academy, and it was like everything about it just seemed right for that period of time. And I did that from 89 all the way through June of 1999. But as soon as she graduated from college, 91. And I got a job with the Wayne County Sheriff's Office, which is where I was from, and I worked with the Sheriff's Office, and I was deputy. I was shift sergeant. I was captain of the patrol division there for a while, and then.
And let me say this,
Yeah.
and he just has a calling of, he is a defender.
Yes.
Just through and through.
Yes.
And I'm a defender of the weak, a defender of the defenseless, and it just really, for it to be a natural fit, it makes sense now, looking back on all those years ago.
Yeah, and I felt like I was doing what I was supposed to do until 1997. And that's when I had an experience. In fact, it was about this time of year in 1997, I had an experience with the Lord. And as soon as that weekend was over, I knew my days in law enforcement were numbered. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It all shifted. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, God was, and that's what this podcast is all about.
Yes.
Life transition, which you guys have had many.
Yes.
Yeah.
Over your years together. And that shifted you back into full-time ministry with
we
the church.
both felt like we were, that God was going to call us into full-time ministry. And I had a... do you want to hear about the experience?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Whatever you want to talk about.
What kind of timeline do you have?
We have no timeline. You just go.
Till Jesus comes.
Okay. So anyway, I was laying across the bed one Wednesday, and I heard the Lord say, I was praying, and I just heard him say, "Sell all you have and follow me."
Oh, wow.
And I jumped up to my feet, and I went into the living room, and I told Christy, I said, "I think I just heard the Lord speak to me and say, 'Sell all you have and follow me.'" And she was like, "Well, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it." And I was like, "Well, wait a minute. I mean, it's not that simple, And I said, and so right after that, a friend of mine called, Fred McKinnon, and he's a worship leader, and he called, and he said, "Ken, we're having a worship service this Friday night." He said, "I just feel like you're supposed to be there down on St. Simon's," and we were living in Jessup, which is just up the road, 45 miles, and so I said, "Well, we'll be there." So that Friday we're on our way down, and I told Christy, I said, if I knew that it was the Lord actually saying that to me, and I knew that I knew, I said, I would do it. I'd do it. I said, but our Kaylin, and I hate to take the grandchildren away from the grandparents. And at that time, Christy's grandmother was still living. I said, and I just said, I just hate to take the grandchildren away from the families, and they get to see them all the time, and da-da-da-da-da, I was saying all that. And then, but I'd go back, well, if I knew it was the Lord, I would do it. And so we go to this worship meeting, and the worship's going. I mean, it's glorious. It was a great worship night. I mean, it was good. I mean, I wasn't, feeling the earth move or anything, but it was really good. Mm-hmm. And it had gone on probably about 2.5 hours. And so my eyes were beginning to cross. It was, knew it was fixing to wind down, and Fred's playing softly, and he says, I just don't feel like the Lord's through yet. He said, I think he still wants to do something. And he's kind of playing real quiet. And we're sitting near the front, and this lady stands up in the back, and she says, I don't even know what she looks like to this day. She just starts prophesying. "So you really want to sell all you have and follow me?" She said. Christy
nailed
my goodness.
Yeah, and she said, "Well, I've heard your yes, and I'm going to sanctify your yes, but you're going to have to let the dead bury the dead." And she said some other things. I can't remember those details, but what I just said I remember well, because
that was what we needed. We needed
so emotionally overwhelmed by what I had heard at that moment that whatever else she said was just spoken.
Your spirit heard it, but
yeah. And then this woman on the platform, she comes down from the platform. Because this woman didn't come up to us from behind and prophesy over us. She just proprophesied
out loud in the room. Yeah.
And so this woman from
but you
front,
knew it was your word.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we were struck. And so this woman comes down off the platform. One of the singers puts her finger in my face and says, "God's plans are yes and amen concerning you," like that. And
That's all we needed.
Yeah, I'm like, and so. In that, she turned out to be the pastor's wife, and so Fred had the pastor and his wife. He introduced us to them and had them pray over us. So they pray over us, and we're going home, and I'm just like, "Can you believe what just happened?" And so that I'm stirred that whole night, and I was off that weekend, and this was a Friday night, and so I get up the next day and I turn TBN on in the afternoon, and T.D. Jakes is preaching. And he's preaching on Samuel anointing David to be king. And so he starts preaching. I start listening, and I just start feeling oil being poured over my head. I could feel it. It was like hot, warm, next to hot, but really warm, hot. Oil, and it's just wave after wave. And the next thing I know, I'm just doubled over, and I'm just groaning and weeping, and I can't talk. I'm just just far more dramatic than that. But it was, that's what was happening, and it went on all night like that. I'd woke up at 3 a.m, got up just to let it out again. I mean, it was just like that, and then Sunday all day like that. And so we go. I had to go to work Monday morning at 6 a.m. and I would often stop by my parents about 7 and have a bowl of cereal and visit with them. And so I'm sitting there eating my cereal, and I start having this vision about revival in the last days in stadiums and the move of God that I saw. And I've not ever seen a move of God yet.
That matched that.
That matched that. Yeah. And I'm just sitting there talking like we're talking now and prophesying everything I'm seeing to my mom and my dad, and even my dad had tears in his eyes, which was very unusual. And my mom, she's weeping, and there was so much juice on it, and so I got a call that I had to go to the office. Somebody was there waiting on me. And so I told them I was on my way to my car. I was getting in my car, and I heard the Lord say, "Prepare the way of the Lord, prepare the way of the Lord, prepare the way of the Lord," 3 times. And I honestly, I really didn't even know what that meant, and I'm still learning. But,
that's right.
But I know a lot more today than I did that day for sure. And so a year and a half later, well, we put our house for sale for 6 months, and nothing. We didn't have any interest in it or anything. So, and I started losing heart a little bit, and I took the sign down. And then about a year later, after that, we're sitting in our living room, and it's something just descended upon me. And I looked at Christy. I said, "I've got the faith to do this." I mean, it was just like I knew something dropped in me, and it dropped in her too. And I said, "I know that right now is the time. I know this is what we're supposed to be. Now's the time." And Christy had told a friend of hers, the next day what had happened that night. Well, the next day, or maybe another day later, I don't know if it's right. I think it was the next day. This man comes to our house and says, "I heard y'all are leaving, and I want to buy your house." Yeah.
With no sign in the yard.
No sign in the yard.
Yeah.
And he offered us like $10,000 more than we were asking a year before.
Well, yes, Lord.
Yeah.
And amen.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Christy's parents had a house in Eastman that they let us live in, and that's what that was our first.
That was our launching.
That was our launching. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And Josiah was about a year old.
Yeah.
So 22. This summer will be 22 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, I like the number 22.
Yeah.
Isaiah 22:22. Key of David, I will
22
put on your
years ago.
shoulder.
Yeah.
Yes.
Will open doors that no man can close.
Lord.
Close doors that no man can open.
And so that's why when Jeff Jansen came,
Yes.
it
Oh,
was
yeah, a few
so
years ago.
Well, yeah,
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
2 years
it was
ago,
Valentine's Day.
I remember.
That Wednesday night, Valentine's Day, and
big.
Yeah,
we're in
locked.
worship. We're in worship.
Oh,
yeah,
I
and he sticks the
remember.
key in my belly and turns it. And he said, "Did you know, Miss Karen?" He was saying, "The Lord's tried to kill some of you in here." And when he did, Miss Karen looked at me and smiled, and I smiled back. And she walked straight up to him and said, "I want you to speak over these folks." And he came and spoke over us, and that's when he prophesied about the stewarding of revival and millions. And he said, do you remember me turning that key during worship? I said, "I do." And I said, "It was the key of David." And I don't even know why I said that. It just came out of my mouth. It was the key of David.
Yes.
That's right. I remember.
And so we go home that night, me and Christy and Josiah. And so Christy knew the story, but I was revamping the whole story with Josiah about going down on that worship night and the lady prophesying, coming back and hearing T.D. Jakes talk about Samuel anointing David to be king. And I was telling him about the revival in stadium. So Miss Karen had invited us to come back the next morning when Jeff Jansen was speaking at the school. So he comes in to speak to the school. And he said, "I just want to tell y'all about a vision I had when I was about 16 years old." He said, "My whole wall just lit up, and there was stadiums, and there was a revival going on in this stadium." And he was describing everything I was telling Josiah about the night before. Yeah, so Josiah's electric, And then so he tells this story, and then when he gets through, he says, "So this morning, I feel like I'm supposed to preach about Samuel anointing David to be king." And then when he says that, everybody's like, injustice. Everybody was just like floored. You can't make that kind of thing up. I mean, how in the world?
We needed that. We needed that.
Yeah, we needed that.
What was that season of your life like? What does it feel like to just need a word from God?
Wow.
How do you hang on when you're just waiting to hear
His sweetness, you hang on every day to His presence.
I can tell you this: when you get a word from God like that, you'll get a child. There's a challenge to the level of word it is.
Yes.
That's so good.
And I've lived in that challenge ever since we stepped out in ministry in 1999, and I've been through some indescribable things. Every kind of emotional thing you can think of between then and now. June 1st, 2010 at 3 a.m, I had a visitation from the Lord, and He spoke 3 things to me, and I was in a horrible place. I was wounded, badly wounded, I started working part-time for a timberland company, a friend of mine, back in the early 2000s, and made a lot of money doing that. And I started doing that, thinking I could do that in ministry, and probably could have had I been able to keep my mind on ministry, but I got my mind focused on making a lot of money, and did well. But the housing market crashed, and when it crashed, we had a lot of inventory, and I ended up having to file bankruptcy. We lost our home, we lost our cars, and we had several children, and I had no job, I had no car, I had no...
And your health?
And my health went... I had been in great shape, but stayed in the gym all my life through the sheriff's office, but everything...
it was a perfect storm.
It was the perfect storm, and I went into depression, and I didn't want to live anymore, and literally... didn't want to live anymore, didn't want to see anybody. I couldn't look at anybody, I couldn't talk. I felt like I'd failed my family. I felt like I'd failed everyone I'd ever known. And I had several nervous breakdowns, and I started drinking, and I wasn't partying. I was by myself out in the woods. I stayed in the woods, or I was either at home or I was in the woods. And I know that sounds weird.
No.
But I was in the woods.
Yeah, no.
And I was drinking vodka and trying to cope. I did not have everything I thought I knew about God was not working.
Yeah.
And so for about, you would think 3 months of that, or 3 weeks of that, or 3 months of that, but it was like 3 years of that.
Oh, wow.
And June 1st, 2010, at 3 a.m, the Lord was in my bedroom, and I woke up and told Christy, I said, the Lord's in here, and I think she could sense it. I said, I'm going to see what he wants. And so I got up and I got in our van and I rode out into the woods. There's a lot of dirt roads where we're from, and so you can ride for miles and never see a soul, So I hit the woods, and as soon as I turned off the paved road into the woods, he said, I'm not mad at you. And when he said that, I could feel his words that were the sincerity of his words went straight through my heart. And I could feel his sincerity like a hug around me. I started weeping and sobbing and weeping and sobbing. And it was like poison was going out of me. And waves were coming over me. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. And it went on for about a half an hour. And then he said, men get a glimpse of what I want to do in the earth, but they try to build it with their hands. And as soon as he said that, I mean, I'm not over the first thing he said, but it's just like I started getting wave after wave. I knew I was getting an extraordinary impartation that to be articulated later kind of thing. It was just wave after wave. That was the second really big, visitation that I had with him. And so that for about 30 minutes later, he said, contend for my presence. And every time he spoke something, I mean, there was an impartation and something, just shoved in my spirit while the poison was coming out, and that changed everything. From that day forward, everything changed. And I'll just be honest, I was still, I wasn't getting snockered or anything at this time, but I bought some, I was out in the woods and I had some vodka and I said, Lord, I'm so sorry I'm doing this. I said, I don't want to do this. And I said, I don't want to do this. And he said, you keep coming to me. And that's what he said. I mean, it was just as clear as a bell. I said, that I can do. And I was determined. I mean, even then, I was determined. I was going after him with everything I had. There's no way, I can't go to him any other way than just as I am. And there's never a day that's it's not like that. Yeah. Because however we are that day is how we got to go to him.
Exactly.
And it doesn't, and so there's no.
No, don't try to get yourself together and then come to Jesus.
Yeah,
Just come to Jesus.
That's right. And so about 3 days later or 2 days later, I had this dream. And I'm at this party, and there's people I know there and people I don't know there. And I looked to the wall, and Bob Jones was sitting in a chair, just stoically with his hands on his knees, just looking straight at me. And I felt like he was looking through me. It was very weird.
So he's a prophet. For people
Bob
that
Jones
know.
is a prophet that you may have seen affiliated with Morning Star. He's Mike Bickle and then IHOP and even Bill Johnson.
Yes.
So he's sitting there, and I just felt drawn to walk up to him. And so I walked up to him, and he says, you keep running after him. He said, all those chains, all those things on you are going to fall off. He said, you just keep running. And it seemed like he said, and I'm going to make myself available to you. And so I woke up, and then and at that time he was still alive, so I thought, I'm going to meet Bob Jones, but he died, and it's about
on February 14th, though.
The day Jeff Jansen came.
You had an encounter with the Lord.
Exactly. That's when Jeff Jansen came. Yeah, February 14th. That was another big thing. So Valentine's Day, amazing
day of love.
Yeah. And then I had another dream with Bob Jones in it. this past year in 2019, I had shared Miss Karen at a prayer one night. Jeff Jackson was in it, and Bob Jones was in it, and a guy named Charlie Shamp, who I don't know.
Yes.
But the three of them were in it. And so that was interesting. And not sure what all that means even to this day. But
and sometimes, okay, so here's the thing about dreams. And of course, you guys know this, but anybody listening, God can talk to us in dreams.
Yes.
Like, this is one of the ways that God talks to us. And he can put people in dreams that we know or that we don't know. And sometimes people can represent other things in dreams, not actually that particular person. So really, to me, dreams and interpreting dreams, it's really an invitation from the Lord to go, what does that mean? I don't know. And there are some dreams that people have that you will live your whole life living out that dream. And then you're going to go, I remember that. This is part of that dream I had when I was 22 years old.
that's right.
That I never really understood. And so just the importance of remembering your dreams. Like, I love that you remember these dreams. You might not know what they mean, but you're stewarding these dreams from God.
Yes. And I write, when he speaks to me, I write it.
Yes.
That's when I sort of write everything that he speaks to me that's revelatory. I write down. And
so much so that you've written books.
Yes.
Well, that's another thing, because I started writing a book in 2012, and that's another story. A friend of ours who had gone on to be with the Lord, a lady that was friends with Christy and I, her husband played bass with me, and they were dear friends, and she died of cancer. And about 2 months after she died, I'm having a dream, and she comes in the dream, and I said, Chris, because I knew she was dead. Even in the dream, I knew she had gone to heaven. Mm-hmm. And I said, Chris, what are you doing here? And she said, I need that book. And her and Christy homeschooled, so I thought, you need the book, because I did not know what that meant.
Shouldn't you be asking Christy for the book?
Yeah, and I said, okay. I said, well, what's heaven like? And she said, it's everything you've heard, but it's more than I can describe. And I'm just like, yeah. And then she straightens her face again and says, I need that book. And I'm still thinking, okay, homeschool, and I'll pass that on to Christy or whatever, because I didn't have a book, and to me. And then I said, well, have you met Jesus? She said, yes, I have. And she said, I need that book. And then I woke up. And so I'm like, for a week or two, I'm just like, what in the world? What book? What is she talking about? And then about 2 months later, or 2.5 months later, somebody called and wanted me to go and lead worship somewhere. And I told him I would. And then like the day I was supposed to be there, it must have been a night meeting, because the Lord said, don't go.
Oh.
And I said, oh my gosh, don't go.
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, don't go. And Christy's like, I don't know if you can do that now. Wait a minute. We were like, I don't know. And I said, I want to go. I can't go. And I call him, and he's like, what? Yeah. I said, I don't understand it. I said, I've never called anybody and done this. I said, but I can't go. He said, okay. And I said, I'm so sorry, and hung up the phone. As soon as I hung up the phone, I knew I was supposed to write a book.
That night.
Yes. Well, started.
Yeah, I didn't even know how to write a letter, much less a book. But I just knew that I was supposed to write all this stuff down. So I started writing. I mean, the hardest page you'll ever write is the first one.
Yes, so true.
And so I didn't know how to start, but I just started writing, and I wrote 7 days a week, 8 to 12 hours a day for 3 months, with the exception when Kaylin came home for Easter. I took off 2 or 3 days while she was there and went right back to writing. And I wrote for 3 months.
Supernatural.
Yeah.
And so I had all of this content and didn't know anything to do with it, really. I mean, and so I started reading about editing and all of that, and whittling and honing and all that. So I tried to do the best I could. I didn't really have a tutor, and somebody gave me a laptop to write on, and it blacked out. Every time I'd get going, it'd black out. If I didn't have it saved, it was gone. So I was I was having a time to begin with, but anyway, I've got it wrote and written, and we ended up the second time we moved back here was 16, right? 2016, and
on the 22nd.
Yeah, and I get here and I've got the moment I get out of our car, my computer slides off this thing, hits the floor, and it's dead. But I had it backed up in a thumb drive, but I had done so much editing work and stuff, but I had raw writing, and so I had to start some of that part over. Yeah. But anyway, since 2016, that book was published.
That was the Presence Driven Life. Is that the one?
Presence Purpose Life.
Presence Purpose Life.
Yeah, and the second one was right after Jeff Jansen came. And Billy Graham died a week after Jeff Jansen was here, and I started having visions and stuff again, real intense for a while, and so that's where the House That Jesus Built was written. So I've had 2 books published in the 4-year period I was here, and the whole time I was here, I was like, because see, I've never not played music ever. I mean, ever.
Yeah.
And so I've never not wanted to play, but I didn't even want to play. And I thought something was wrong with me, and it probably was. but I might have had some burnout or something going on. But I was really focused on the book stuff, So they're done. And I may write some more sometime, but I'm better manager. So I'm kind of like, if I don't know what I'm doing, I can't have any other distractions. But once you begin to learn a little bit about what you're doing, then you can do other things and you can go back to it. It's going to be okay,
Yeah.
And so that's, and so now I'm kind of burning musically, particularly prophetic flow, spontaneous worship. I love to, we practice songs that we know we're going to do, 3 or 4, whatever, depending.
Because you still occasionally go and lead worship.
Yeah, we've been leading worship
when you go
on Sunday mornings at a little church in Winfield. Yeah, and we're still going to the ramp on Sunday nights.
And then you sometimes travel too.
Yeah, that's right. We travel
bring
to Georgia.
You in to do worship.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And so we've been doing that, and that's been fun. But I love when the Holy Spirit moves on us and we go into spontaneous flow, and I love playing with musicians that can travel, because then you can go from one genre to the next, however the Lord leads. I love that.
So when did this happen? You said there's just been a recent shift in the last few months for you regarding music.
I got called around the 1st of January to go back to Georgia, and maybe a week after that, a guy from Winfield, New Life Fellowship, Jerry Norris, called and wanted to know if we would go there and lead worship there. And so we've led worship there a few times when we went to Georgia, and it just like somebody turned the faucet on them.
Here it goes.
We were playing again. Yeah.
Wow.
And so we know we're at the precipice of something.
Yes.
But we don't know.
Yeah, what's next? We don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I understand that. And this is something that you guys can do together because you're both musical. Do you feel like that's one of the... Do you write music?
I do,
said?
yeah.
And do you write too, Christy?
I don't.
You don't?
I've written a
just
song or two.
So have you been writing any music lately?
That's right after I got the call to go to Georgia, like 2 days later, I wrote a song, started writing it. And we did it down there. And so I mean, it's like the juices have been turned on again, just like for writing the book, it's like now that's kind of off and this is back on again.
Yeah.
So.
What are obviously music, the prophetic is burning and passionate in you. Where are you in this season of your life? You're home with your kids, Christy, homeschooling. You guys are doing music. You just kind of waiting?
Yeah. I mean, I've had some heard some. Feel like I've gotten some direction, but I'm not sure. I've kind of gotten the what and not the where.
Yeah, or the when, maybe.
Maybe, but the when feels really close, you know, but you know, all three of those components are important. So the what is very important, and the where and the when. You know, there's not one, and the how too. You know, really, all of those things are important, but all of those things, you know, will have to be answered by God. Because if there's one thing I've learned through this journey, is that I don't add a whole lot to it, except by yes, or, you know.
Yes,
that's
and
good.
Amen.
That's good.
Yes and amen. Christy, what has been the easiest thing for you in marriage?
The easiest thing.
Because when I took a poll on my social media and said what kind of questions to ask about me and my husband, that was one of the questions you asked me.
Oh, wow.
What was the easiest thing in the marriage, and what's been one of the hardest things in marriage?
Easiest thing in the marriage.
Because to me, you are a true Proverbs 31 woman and wife.
Thank you.
Like, if there was ever a mother and a wife and a woman to model yourself after, it's Christy
wow.
Mullis.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love being at home. I love being married. I have loved being married, and I've loved being all the things of home and family. And so, wow, I don't know what's been the easiest. He lets me be me, you know, as a wife. And we were talking about how important that is today, just for your spouse to let the other one just be themselves. And
Okay, explain, because I feel like there's something on that.
we were talking about expectations of newly married people and how we have these expectations, and that we should not. We should let them be.
How do we
them.
not? Because you're talking to somebody who's only been married 5
so
years that has
hard.
to go through. Dave and I have these conversations a lot.
Because we don't want to stifle the person by putting we don't know them, so how can we expect? I mean, besides go for Jesus with all your guts, you know. I don't know. We were just talking about false expectations we put on each other.
I mean, it's the environment to you know, when I married Christy, I didn't know every detail of every moment of her life before we got married.
Right.
And so if something comes up that's not going to be something I like, well, it's, you know, that can't change anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the other thing is, if there's anything I hate, is having to walk around on eggshells around somebody to keep them pleased. I just can't stand that.
And I've never felt that way. I thought, so that's an easiest part.
And I always felt like I had to walk that way around God. I always felt like I had to walk that way, you know, in certain places. And I don't, you know, I don't want Christy now, and I'm probably worse at it than her even, but I don't want her to have to walk on eggshells around me.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to walk on eggshells around her. And then, you know, so here's the deal, you know, for me is, you know, when you get married, you've committed to forgiveness. You're committed to patience. You're committed to long suffering. You're committed to kindness. She's as kind as they are. Mm-hmm. And so that's the easy, you know, she makes it easy because of her kindness. And we can talk about, we have never not talked about everything. You talk. Yeah.
Well, we have always, when we came into day one, we will talk about everything. We just made this pact, good, bad, overdrafts, whatever. We're just going to talk about it.
No
Temptations,
secrets.
no secrets.
Yeah, because whatever stays in the dark.
So that was, at times, that's
it.
hard. That's a hard thing about marriage, too.
Oh, yeah.
So it's easy to make that pact.
Yeah.
And it's hard to keep it.
So speaking of hard to keep it, what was that like for you when Ken has these 3 years in the woods? Did you know what he was doing out in the woods?
Oh, yeah. I knew everything. So I knew his heart. I guess I just could not ever not see his heart going after the Lord. He never got hard towards God, you know. And I could always see his heart. So this God carried us. And I felt like I was in the ark. I felt carried and secure and safe, and I had a job to do every day in my home. And I just put my hand to it every day and did what I needed to do and find joy and fulfillment in that. And I just knew I was being kept and knew we were being preserved. And I felt like it was just a season. And that's interesting. The ark was about that length of time. And I really felt like I had that word that we were in the ark.
Yeah.
And so I just got up and did the things, you know.
Well, there's been a common theme in this story when things have gotten harder, when you've been in transition, is that you guys have had words from God.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is what we stand
lifeline.
on. This is what sustains us, is having a word from God,
Amen.
hearing from God.
We have to hear his voice. And you were asking me a while ago, well, I'm convinced that he is raising a generation that is going to step into, when he says we live and move and have our being in him, that we literally step into him, that we step into this, that's, a lot of times we spend a few minutes a day trying to get into the secret place with God, but I think he's wanting to call a generation that goes into the secret place and never comes out again. And he said that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds, which is present tense, not past tense, that proceeds. Another translation says that comes from the mouth of God. And so hearing his voice, hearing his word on a matter, however he speaks. I mean, it can be through scripture. It can be through what you were saying to me a while ago. It can be through reading a prophetic word, or hearing a prophetic word, or a child.
Yes. Nature, anything.
In any way he chooses to speak, and where that he spoke to you. You live, that's where we live. And so I believe he's raising up a generation to be that. And so with every dispensation and every move of God, I feel like it's always been towards that. Because I feel like communion, that is, like IHOP is a 24/7 prayer and worship prayer, harp and bowl thing, but and that's good. Mm-hmm. I like that. No telling what all's happened because of that.
Yep.
But I also believe it's a prophetic picture of who God's called us to be individually, where we're living in such
24/7.
Yeah, 24/7. And I mean, there's really no reason. I mean, you have to exercise your senses. You have to they're the disciplines of giving yourself to that, and the faith that it's possible, because he says all things are possible to him that believes. That means you can be a police officer, you can go fishing, you can play soccer, you can do whatever and still be in that place.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what I believe is his heart for this generation. And I don't think necessarily, I've always thought in terms of the older generation and the younger generation, but I think it's the generation who will. And
whoever says, matter. I believe it.
Yeah, and there's, I think the generations, it's going to be a generation of who will, and not about age. And
I agree.
And so it's more of a spiritual thing than a physical age thing. Mm-hmm. And even though there is some of that, but I do think it's that, and because he's building us together. So it's not one or the other in age group. He's building us. We're being built together.
Yes.
And he's calling us from faith to faith and glory to glory. So I think the generation is a spiritual generation, and it's the one who will. Yeah. Who will take what he's saying.
Are we that generation?
I hope so. And I want to be.
I do too.
I want to be. And I'm telling you, I mean, and we were talking about this earlier today, just like I was talking about, there was no grid, no infrastructure for the ramp back then. Mm-hmm. There was no infrastructure for Bethel. There was no infrastructure for Morning Star at that time. But there became one.
Right.
And so we've seen the church change so much, and the revelation that's coming out of the church now is extraordinary what God's revealing to people. And I mean, when I listen to Bill Johnson or Mike Bickle or Micah and Miss Karen and the revelation is growing, and there's a depth to it now, and that's even more personal and more deeper level of intimacy and more presence in the worship, and there's more. God's doing great things. We've seen the church change. I mean, we've seen from no grid to look at. I mean, if I'd have been 18 years old and walked in the ramp, I think I would have felt the same way I felt when I walked into the Holiday Inn.
Yes.
It was the energy, the music, the possibilities.
Yes.
There were possibilities there. And when I went to church, I didn't see any possibilities for anything, Of course, I wasn't saved, but, just this is not where I want to be. The Holiday Inn is where I do want to be. This place is great. That's what I was thinking. But, of course, it wasn't ultimately, but it was in the sense of awakening me to musical possibilities and that kind of thing. So yeah, we've seen things change so far. I mean, when we started dating, we didn't have cell phones, personal computers. All of that came later. Yeah. My daughter was asking me, my little 5-year-old, she was saying, what kind of tablet did you have when you were growing up? And I was like, baby, we didn't even have cell phones. We didn't have that. And,
we were somewhere and came across a payphone, and Michael was, I don't know, 11, 12, and we had to explain, when you made a phone call, you would have to go to a payphone and put money in and dial your number, and it would only give you a couple of minutes with your quarter, and you always had to have quarters, and like that was just a foreign thing, like what is that?
Yeah,
so
that's funny.
Hilarious. Well, I do think that the time that we're living in is very significant. I do feel that we are on the edge of something, I think, individually, and I think corporately, for the people that are going, yes, Lord, whatever it looks like, whatever it sounds like. And there are people probably in their 80s and 90s waiting for this. They have prayed and believed for this their whole life.
Yes.
And God is going to allow them to see what they've been believing to see. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, my mom is she's still living, and Christy's mom and dad are still living. I would I'm glad they're seeing what they're seeing, and I hope they see a lot more.
Yeah.
Won't be surprised if they don't.
Yeah. I have we could just sit here and talk all night.
Yes, thank you.
And we do usually.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we get together, I feel like we could talk forever. But I love that you guys got to come and
thank you for having
share that
us.
Part of your story. I even heard a few things tonight I didn't know
Good. That
about
was
you
fun.
guys. I didn't know about you going to college or going to Lee. That was kind of cool.
Thanks.
So thanks for doing that.
You're welcome.
Our
Thank you.
pleasure. Yeah.
Sell everything you have and follow me. Wow, what faith. Ken and Christy are two of the most genuine, Jesus-loving people I have ever met. You can find Ken's books on Amazon and can connect with him and Christy on Facebook. I've included their contact info in the show notes for today. Friends, so glad you joined us. We've got a Facebook page for the podcast as well as a YouTube channel. Just search What's Next God Podcast and click subscribe. Or you can find me on Instagram or Facebook under the name Melissa Matheson. That's math, like 4 + 1 = 5, I before E, son, S-O-N. I hope you have a great week, and we'll be back here on Wednesday talking to an Enneagram 7 who is living his dream of creating fun and making memories for people's special events. If you want to come join us, I'll save you a seat. We're going to sit around the table, have a cup of coffee, and talk about what's next, God.